Hi, and here we are again, back in Peaky Boardgamer. My name is Hector, and today I will teach you a game called Cascadia, designed by Randy Flynn and published by Flatout Games. This is a tile placement game that reminds me of Calico. However, to be honest, this is more to my liking as it's less puzzly. The game is for up to 4 players, also have a family and a solo mode, and plays in under an hour. I think it's time to see what this game is all about. In Cascadia, players compete to create the most diverse Pacific Northwest environment. Players alternate turns taking a habitat tile and a wildlife token and then adding it to their play area, thus creating their environment and the animals that live inside. When all players have placed their 20th tile, the game ends. Players will gain points by creating large habitat areas, but mostly by placing animals in patterns depicted in wildlife target cards. The player that creates the best ecosystem in Cascadia will win the game. Let's first take a closer look in the components of the game. We have wildlife tokens depicting 5 different animal types. We have bears, hawks, foxes, salmons, and elks. Then we have the habitat tiles. There are 5 different habitat types: wetlands, forests, mountains, rivers, and prairies. Most of the tiles depict 2 of these habitats, however, some of them depict only 1. These habitat tiles are called keystone tiles, and they also depict the symbol of nature tokens. Last but not least, habitat tiles depict the type of animals that can be placed on them. So let's set up our game. First, place all wildlife tokens inside the bag and place it in the middle of the table. Create a supply with the nature tokens and shuffle all habitat tiles together. Then randomly separate from these tiles 20 tiles per player in the game plus another 3. The rest of the tiles are removed. Form a general supply with the selected tiles in the middle of the table. Randomly flip 4 habitat tiles from the supply and place them in the middle of the table. Then randomly draw 1 wildlife token from the bag and place it next to the first tile. Do the same for all habitat tiles. After you separate wildlife scoring cards depending on their type, shuffle each stack and then randomly draw 1 card from each type. The rest of the cards return in the box. It is recommended that in your first place you use the A cards, which is depicted in the bottom right corner. These cards represent objectives that will score you victory points at the end of the game. Then deal 1 starter habitat token to each player at random. The rest of the tiles return in the box. Players reveal their starter tiles and place them in front of their play area. The game is now ready to start. Players alternate turns, starting with the first player and then continuing clockwise. On their turn, players select a pair of a habitat tile and wildlife token and then add them onto their environment. Finally, they replenish the empty space with a new tile from the supply and a new wildlife token from the bag. Then it's the next player's turn, and this continues until the end of the game. Let's see now the rules of a player's turn in greater detail. In the middle of the table, we've created 4 pairs of a habitat tile and a wildlife token. Normally, a player has to choose 1 pair of the available ones. However, before selecting, the player has to check if we have overpopulation type A or overpopulation type B. Overpopulation type A is when in the middle of the table we have 4 same wildlife tokens. In this case, all tokens are set aside and we draw 4 new tokens from the bag. If the same situation exists, we repeat the same process. Overpopulation type B is when 3 out of 4 tokens is the same. With type B, the player chooses whether to proceed with these options or set aside the same tokens and draw again from the bag. However, the player may choose only once. If we have overpopulation type B for a second time, the player has to proceed with these options. Players that have nature tokens, however, have some additional options before making their selection. These tokens have 2 different uses. A player can spend 1 nature token and wipe out any number of tokens and replace them with random new ones from the bag. A player can also spend the nature token and combine any habitat tile with any wildlife token as their choice, instead of selecting a preset pair. In any case, after the player has made the selection, if there are any set-aside tokens, they return back in the bag. Then players add the selected tile and token to their environment in any order. The habitat tile must be placed. The only rule is that at least one side of the new tile has to be connected with a side of the environment. Players, of course, are trying to create large areas of same habitat types. The wildlife token now may be placed in the environment. If placed, it has to go to an empty habitat tile that depicts the corresponding animal. So I have two options at the moment. I will place it here. Whenever players add a wildlife token to a hex depicting this symbol, they immediately gain one nature token from the supply. If a player cannot or does not wish to place the wildlife token in their environment, the token is placed back in the bag. After a player finishes with placement, they have to refill the empty spaces so that we have again 4 pairs of tiles and tokens. In our example, we simply have to place a tile here and the new token above this tile. This concludes the player's turn and the next one may start. If a player is unable to refill the empty habitat tile space because the habitat tile supply is empty, then the game ends immediately and we move to scoring. In scoring, players use a scoring pad to track their points. First, they score how well they did in placing animals in relation to the wildlife scoring cards. Scoring cards is a main part of this game. In this video, I'll be explaining the 5 A cards that are also more suitable for your first plays. If, however, you need explanation of every single card with examples, you should click to my other video. I've placed a link up there, and you will find every information regarding scoring cards. Let's start with grizzly bears. Bears in general need to be in specific group numbers with no other bears around them. With this specific card, the player scores for the number of bear pairs that is in their environment. I currently have only 1 pair of bears and I score only 4 victory points from that card. Moving to elks now, elks need to be placed in specific shapes as indicated on the card. This specific card requires players to place elks in straight lines. Take note that each animal can belong to one shape. I have a line of 3 elks here, so I score 9 victory points from that, and I have 1 alone elk, which will score me another 2 victory points, so 11 victory points from that. Salmons now work in runs. A run of salmons is a group of salmons in which each salmon is connected to a maximum of 2 other salmons. If that's not the case, the whole group of salmons is not a run. This specific card scores each run in the environment depending on the number of salmons contained. This run contains 4 salmons, so I gain 12 victory points, and this contains 3, I gain another 8. So we have 20 victory points in total for this card. Moving to hawks now. Hawks work better when they're not adjacent to each other and when they have lines of sight between them. This simple card just requires that hawks are not adjacent to each other. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 hawks with no other hawks around them, so I gain 11 victory points from that. Finally, we have the foxes. The foxes grant victory points depending on the animals that surround them. With this card, you score for each fox separately, depending on the unique animals that surround them, also counting other foxes. So, this fox is surrounded by salmons, hawks, bears, and foxes. So we'll score 4 victory points. This fox is surrounded by bears, hawks, and foxes. So 3 unique animals, and the player gains another 3 victory points. Finally, this fox is surrounded again by 4 unique animals and grants the player another 4 victory points. So 11 points in total. After scoring for cards, players score habitat tile corridors. Players simply, for each type of habitat, they find their largest connected group. Then they score 1 victory point for each tile in the group. So I will score 6 victory points for my mountains, 4 victory points for the forests, 3 victory points for the prairies, 8 victory points for the wetlands, and finally 2 victory points for the largest rivers group. Then players are ranked according to this habitat tile scoring to gain some bonus points. This is a separate scoring for each habitat type. In a 3 or a 4 players game, the player with the largest habitat corridor scores 3 victory points and the second 1. If 3 or more players tie for the largest rank, they all gain 1 victory point and there is no second ranking. If two players are ranked first, they both gain 2 victory points and there is no second ranking as well. Finally, all ties for second ranking grants players with 1 victory point. In a 2-players game, only the first rank scores 2 victory points. If there is a tie for the first ranking, then both players gain 1 victory point. Finally, players score 1 victory point for each unused nature token. Players then tally up their scores and the player with the highest total wins the game. If there is a tie, the tied player with the most unused nature tokens wins the game. If there is still a tie, all tied players share their victory. And that was the video for Cascadia, a lovely tile placement game for all family. If you like our videos and want to see more, please subscribe to my channel, and until next time, have fun and play more board games.